Gene, we've been here for 4 weeks. We're still wearing the same clothes. It's 4 weeks worth of recording.
I'm still drinking the same cold cup of coffee.
Still got 2 days worth of growth.
Yeah, look at
Takes a while.
the
That'd be
gray streak.
awesome. We just keep doing it.
Next
Welcome
time.
back to the show.
Yeah, so this is like episode 98.
This is
of
the open,
Carl's.
Gene. This is the cold open. We haven't started yet. Damn it. And then I told Gene, this is the cold open.
Is it cold? I'm not cold.
The old open.
It's warm in here.
The
Gene, old open.
What are we doing? What are we talking about? Right.
I forgot. Yeah, I'm having a great time talking to you today, man. It's been a while. So this is the last episode, but
if you're listening to this episode and you haven't listened to the 3 before it,
it's gonna be weird.
You might want to back up because we're doing a kind of a 4-episode
I guess might be 10. Who knows?
Series. I don't know.
But you and I did a podcast for a long time together.
We did.
Called BizCraft, and there's a lot of this kind of stuff in there over those episodes, but we never really touched on that again once we started this old bureau briefing thing spun back up. So
I like how you remembered the name.
Yeah, it took me a second.
Bureau briefing.
So some guy sent you a text, and there you go.
Some guy.
Yeah. So we're talking about history through your services-based company, nGen.
Yeah.
And follow up from it felt like a little bit of a cliffhanger in the last episode.
Yeah.
You're a little down on that last note. So spoiler alert, Carl's still with us to this day.
I'm here, still alive.
So let's get to that point. Let's get from there where you're like, what the hell is happening?
Yeah.
With all these people, and why am I responsible for stuff that somebody else did, and I don't understand things, and now you're at the bureau, or you're running the bureau.
And if you think about it, you can go back and listen to the episode we had where we both talk about getting sued. So you can get more details on that, or we'll hopefully link that up. But yeah, so we get to that point, and the thing I realized about the model that didn't work was, even though we were being pitched work, it was only a certain amount of time of telling so many people no before your reputation becomes.
They're the people that say no.
Hard to work with.
Well,
and so
would you say that? Would you say that your reputation was, the nGen was hard to work with, difficult?
I wouldn't say hard to work with. I would say we were difficult to hire, not difficult to work with. Although I think there was an amount of freedom that, if you decide you don't want to work on something anymore, but you've committed to it, it kind of goes against that sense of freedom. So there's probably some challenges there too. But I think the bigger thing was there was no sustained biz dev effort. Had I kept getting on stages to talk about nGen, to talk about the biz dev, had I continued to do more of that direct outreach, all of those types of things, I think it would have made a huge difference and made nGen a lot stronger. We truly ended up being too many eggs in one basket. I mean, that really was kind of it. And also, I had fallen in love with the bureau.
So I wanted to say that you dropped that last time you said you took like 9 months off. Like, what does that mean?
So the jellyfish model had gotten to a point. I'll back up just a minute. So we had a house fire, and this would have been 2008, maybe.
That's right, I remember that.
Or maybe it was a little bit later. And during that house fire, I couldn't do anything with nGen. Like, I was dealing with insurance companies. I was making sure my family was settled in the new place. I was like doing all this kind of stuff. And it's part of nGen lore. The 2 weeks that I couldn't be a part of the company were the most successful 2 weeks of the company.
But that affected you. I remember talking to you about that. That affected you deeply.
It was one of these things where you're really happy that you've suddenly been released from what you thought was your burden of having to take care of, a dozen people's mortgages, and like, you're responsible for them getting paid. You've got to find the work. You got to this. No, they can stand up and do it themselves. And I was talking with a good friend and was explaining, it's like, if you're this big oak that's standing there and everybody's kind of underneath you for shade, they're never going to feel the sun. You're always going to be the one feeling like you have to protect them. But as soon as the tree is gone and they feel the sun, they stand up and they start doing stuff, because now they don't feel like they've got somebody else who's doing it. And the thing was, it's not that they were lazy. They just thought it was my job. So as soon as they knew I could not do my job, they all started doing different parts of it,
Mm-hmm.
and much better than me. They landed business. They got things out on time. The whole machine kept running without me. And it was depressing. It was a bad time for me, because I felt like I had spent all this time in my life creating something, and now it didn't really need me.
Mm-hmm.
So the sense of, I didn't want to be important. And I wrote this article, my irrelevant strategy, because I did want to become irrelevant after that point, when I realized it doesn't need me. And I thought, you know what, I've got another season personally. So maybe nGen isn't just where I'm supposed to be. Now in 2012,
Were you
um,
were you I'm sorry to interrupt your chain of thought, but
yeah,
were
yeah, no,
you
it's fine.
sort of at the time, were you sort of aware of your company going through these seasonal changes and sort of reinventing itself every 3 to 4 to 5 years? Were you
I,
aware of
th-
that?
I think towards the end I was. We
Yeah.
actually have a graphic novel I've got to find, which is the origin of nGen. We had a client called Roundtable who basically made graphic novels out of
Right, right, right.
famous literature, right? They would turn like the Iliad into a graphic novel,
Right,
although that
right.
would be like take up a whole room.
Yes.
But we did a trade out. I won't get into the details, but yeah. So we took a significant amount of trade out for this graphic novel that I never published or put anywhere or shared publicly, because I thought it could hurt people. There was some stuff in there that was very real, but anyway. So yeah. So I get to this point. I think I do kind of realize there's seasons. I had always
Mhm,
heard in my just business life that the most successful people shift careers in their
mhm.
30s.
Right.
They take everything they've learned, and that for me was kind of from the advertising agency to nGen. Um, but then we get in, and things are rolling great. It's 2012 when I get that first connection to the bureau. Now,
Mhm,
we have not had the threat of the lawsuit, any of this kind of stuff. I'm kind of backing up in the timeline here, a little flashback. I get an email from Greg Hoy and Greg Story, who were
mhm.
both running Happy Cog, independent Happy Cogs. It's really weird.
We should get them
Um,
to talk about their story.
we should, yeah. And we actually call them BFFs, the Bureau Founding Fathers. But they contacted me about coming to hang out with about 24 other owners,
Mhm.
to just talk about what's going on. And I didn't even know that they knew who I was. And I just replied back, "Why me?" And they said, "Well, we've been reading your blog and about the jellyfish model, and you're either really smart or totally full of shit.
We wanna find out.
We will find out." And I replied back, "I would like to know as well."
Yes.
So went and hung out and literally fell in love with this idea of connection. It wasn't called the Bureau; it was called Shop Talk. And then because of
That's right.
Coyer's
Oh,
podcast, it shifted over to Owner Camp.
right.
And I fell in love. I became a serial attendee. So this is to the 9 months thing. nGen is going great, um, making great money. I am now the absent owner who's checking in weekly. I do have key people who are letting me know, hey, we could use your help here, or whatever. It's not like people aren't allowed to talk to me or whatever. Like I'm totally absent. But I took like 9 months. I got in shape. I lost 30 pounds. I remember we were on stage at Converge in
Mhm,
Florida. And I was just so heavy. I'd gone over 200 pounds, which for me, like a normal weight's 170.
mhm.
So I was a disaster. And so
Hmm,
that 9 months I did that. I learned how to cook a little bit, not great. I like did all these things, but I mainly just went to bureau events.
mhm,
Like anything they did, I would go to. I was still speaking a lot. Um, and I was trying to figure out what I was going to do. And the Gregs wanted to talk to me about joining them,
mhm,
because I was starting to do things that were a little competitive. I wasn't putting on events like they were, but I was thinking about a lead sharing network or this or that. And it was actually Alyssa. She's 18 now, but at the time she would have been 12, and or even younger. Yeah, she would have been younger, but she would have been 10. So she came out back, and I was working on stuff, and she said, "How do you want people to remember you?" And I said, what do you mean? She goes, when you're gone, like when you're dead, how do
Mm,
you want people to remember you? I said, I want to be remembered as a nice guy who was able to succeed.
mm.
And she looks at me and quotes me to me. How are you going to measure that? Because that was the kind of thing when we were playing around. Like I would, as a shop owner, and I said, I'll judge it based on the number of people I can help.
Right.
I'll keep track of everybody that I help. And then she goes, how does that scale? And these are just little jokes. And it turns out I think her mom put her up to it. But then I looked at her and I said, I really don't know. I'll have to get back to you on that. And then went back to reading this email from the Gregs, and I was like, oh shit,
Mm,
the Bureau is the jellyfish model.
mm,
I don't have to help anybody. I just have to connect people that can help themselves, help each other. Right. And so if I can connect people who help each other, then that totally scales. And now I'm in love with two ideas. I nGen that I've been with for a long
mhm,
time that is now, in 2014, starting to suffer. Right. Like I remember exactly when the lawsuit threat came in and all of that kind of stuff unraveled. But it was on a 2013, 2014, and the Bureau, which I am becoming part of now.
mhm.
And then we get to, there was a failed buyout effort. I don't want to really get into that. I was looking for anyone to help, and
Mhm.
I hurt some people during that. I mean, that's the thing. If you look back on 14 years of doing something, there are going to be people that you let down. There are going to be people that you hurt. There are going to be
Right,
people that probably don't want to see you,
right.
shopping on Christmas Day, right?
Mm.
Nobody wants that. Why would you shop on Christmas Day? I don't know what I'm talking about now.
Well,
But people who just, there are going to be people who are upset. And I get that. And I hope if anybody's listening, I own everything. I accept responsibility for everything that went down. But you get to that point, you're trying to just get an out. Like, what can I do? Um, but eventually it gets to this point where 2016, we had a health scare in my family. My wife, it looked like she might have had
mhm,
cancer. And I wasn't making a lot of money at the Bureau, and nGen was on the ropes. And I remember talking with Greg Hoy. We were at TAPS in Midtown in Atlanta. The owner summit was going on. I said, hey, I got to spin nGen back up. I got to be able to make sure I keep my insurance on. I got to make sure all this stuff is happening. I've got this stuff going on with my family. And he was like, hey, I think I'm going to double down on Happy Cog, and I'm going to, really try to get it rolling. And I looked at him and I said, so I can just have the Bureau? Like, we can
mhm,
figure that out. I mean, I compensated him. Like
mhm.
we did all that stuff, did a
Yep.
buyout, whatever. But then I was like, okay, okay. And the interesting thing, to really kind of bring it around, at the end, nGen was not nGen. That
Mhm.
final season, it was somebody else's company that I was trying to transition to.
Right.
And that was a lot of the stuff that I wish, people say they have no regrets or whatever. I have a regret. I shouldn't have done that. I should have realized that when something sounds too good to be true, it's too good to be true. That
Mhm.
when you're in an emotional state and you're trying to transition, I should have just called it and kind
Right.
of taken care of everybody the best I could, and closed nGen. But what was funny was I told my family, um, and again, this was 2016, so I'd also just turned 50. So you're like at this point where you're like, am I starting over again?
Mhm.
Like, oh my God. So you have all these different things, were coming at me. And I remember telling my family, I think I'm just going to close nGen. I'm
Mhm.
just going to shut it down and just dive into the Bureau. And Alyssa again, right? Like 10-year-old Alyssa goes out there and says all those things, which make me realize the Bureau is my thing. And now, at this time, um, she comes and she's 14 and she's like, you can't close nGen. And I'm going, what?
Mhm.
And she goes, you told me you started nGen because you love me and Kaylee and mom, and you wanted to be able to have flexibility to be home and to watch us grow up and all this kind of stuff. I was born when nGen was born, and you can't just close it. And I was like,
Mm.
I was already shattered from all these things that I felt like a failure
Right.
for.
Oh man.
And now I'm like going, okay.
Ugh.
So technically, the Bureau acquired nGen. I owned both 100%, so I was able to do it for $1. And it was just, I asked Alyssa's permission, and I did. I said, is it okay if the Bureau acquires nGen and then nGen is within, kind of the DNA? And she was like, yeah, yeah.
Hmm.
But to this day,
Hmm.
occasionally I'll see somebody wearing an nGen shirt or something like that. And I miss it. I mean, I miss those times with
Yeah.
those people. I miss all that stuff. And I do regret. I mean, I made some bad decisions. I things I just shouldn't have done, and it did hurt people. But I also know that there were, when the times were good, it really helped. And I can't just focus on those negative things. You need to go back and you need to look and you need to realize that, you know, Travis became the design director at Square.
Hmm.
That's not a crap job, right? That's pretty amazing. Varric is doing amazing stuff with video, and the I keep tabs on people through social and just kind of see what they're doing. But honestly, the day that stands out the most for me with nGen, of all the things that we accomplished and all the different battles we went through and all the struggles and all that kind of stuff, Paul Figueroa was our landlord. And I remember probably about 2 weeks in, he came over and he was on the phone and he said, I can't right now. I'm at nGen. And my life changed that day because we were a place. We weren't an idea. We weren't a concept or a business model. We were a place. And Paul was there,
Hmm.
and I just remember he got off the phone and I went, yeah,
Hmm.
you know,
Hmm. Hmm.
oh man,
Well,
that was quite a ride.
yeah, I think Hans, you have a lot of very specific questions, and I think it's hard to get into a lot of the. I know there are people that listen to the show who are owners or operators or whatever that are sort of big picture thinkers, creative feelers, and I know there are a lot that are like nuts and boltsers.
Oh
You know
yeah.
what I mean? I don't know that we can get into a lot of the nuts and bolts of the handoff and the logistics of that stuff.
Well,
Nor do I think you should.
and the thing I was going to say is, I was talking with Rob about this yesterday. Rob Har from Sparkbox. Rob called after DPM Summit was over to see how I was doing, because we've talked about this too. Like after a big event, a little bit of a
Mhm.
decompression, re-entry into the real world, a little bit of depression kind of stuff. And he was like, "You good?" And I'm like, "I'm good." And we just started talking about things. Um, there just comes a time when you're a part of something that you need to realize it's not who you are. And we had that another episode recently about removing yourself from those things. But for me, when I look back on nGen, I wonder what would have happened if I had had the Bureau in those early years. You
Mm.
know, not in 2012 when it was just forming and I was kind of set in my ways, but like that was part of the conversation with Rob, because he came into the Bureau as they were going through one of these transformations.
Mhm.
And Rob is like crazy smart, really great on the ops side, the nuts and bolts side, but had the Bureau, right, to help elevate or at
Mhm.
least speed up, right, accelerate what he was doing. Um, I wonder, like, what if it had come earlier? Would it not have worked? Like,
Mm.
did everything lay out the way it was supposed to? Probably, but yeah, there is nowhere I would rather be than right here,
Right.
like with the Bureau. This
It's a
is
beautiful
just
thing.
this is just it, and
It
I just
is it is sort of the culmination of your history, though. You know what I mean? And the fact that
yeah,
you're literally part of it, the Bureau, from
yeah,
almost its inception to where it is now. I mean, it's sort of a natural progression, I think, for you.
yeah. It totally is, and the reason that I feel it works is because I can be a neutral entity
Mhm.
I'm not doing any of that kind of work anymore, but I totally know what that kind of work was and for the
Mhm.
most part is. Like the human part of it doesn't change. The
Mm-mm.
processes may change, the tools may change, but the inner workings of the humans that are
Mhm.
doing this stuff, we're still struggling with the same thing. And
Yep.
so it's a place where I explained it to somebody this way. Those first 14 years when I was at Husk, where Melanie was like just grooming me and teaching me, those 14 years I was learning, right? I was just learning what is it to be a leader? How
Mhm.
is it she does this siren song where she can fire somebody and they still come to the Christmas party and give her a hug? Like, who is
Mm.
this creature? Like, she's learned these things. And so for 14 years, I'm kind of getting that education. Not, I didn't do nearly as well as she did. For the next 14 years, I'm doing, right?
Mhm.
I'm like, I'm nGen and I'm doing that and I'm all this kind of stuff. And now, like this final third, I'm just sharing
Mhm.
and connecting. And so to be able to go from learning to doing and now have this as kind
Mhm.
of that personal final season, um, yeah, I just can't even imagine
It's
being
beautiful.
anywhere but right here.
It's beautiful. Yep. I think it's where your heart led you the whole time, man.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, what kind of, all of that, what, what's something you can leave the kids with?
You know, again, things are going to change and you're going to move from one part of your life to the next part of your life. Don't feel like the best times are behind you
Mm.
or that there are parts of your life you're not allowed to look at and question. Like, just keep learning, just keep moving forward and embrace all of the pain and embrace all of the joy, all the success, all the failure, because that's why you're here. That's where you are right now. And the one thing that I think is always true, I know it's been true for me and most of the people that I know, you are in a better position right now to succeed than you have ever been before because you know yourself better, you know what works better, and you know what doesn't work better. And if you just trust yourself, you're going to crush it.
Man, I love that. What a great note. Um, and on that one,
I am going to take that nap I mentioned in the first
you
episode.
deserve it, my friend. You deserve it, my friend. Go change your shirt because you spend 4 weeks of this
It
stuff.
stinks in here. And I'll also say next week, we're going to talk about Eugene Crawford.
We'll see about that.
We're going to dig into period 3.
Sounds like a crazy, terrible ride. All right.